Welcome back to Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get the latest on President-elect Donald Trump and all of the threads we're following as a result of this year's election. Political analyst Rich Rubino joins me now. And Rich, my first question has to do with the Democratic Party. This whole time that Biden's been in office, I think the argument could be made that even though Republicans weren't in charge of the White House, there was still a general understanding that Trump was seen as sort of the figurehead of the Republican Party. Now we're going to have Trump in office for 4 years. This question came to me today. Who is going to be the head of the Democrat Party at this point? Harris, coming off of a loss. Biden, not going to be, of course, in contention anymore. Who becomes that spearhead figure of the Democrats?
Yeah, it's interesting. It certainly would not be Biden. I think he'll be seen as a one-term president. The Democrats do not want a one-term president whose job approval rating was well under 50% as the titular head of the party. I think you can say the same thing for Vice President Harris. I think she's somebody like, for example, Mike Dukakis in '88 or John Kerry in 2004 that the Democrats will largely move on from. It's very hard for me to envisage a scenario where she's ever a candidate, a presidential candidate again, or for that matter, a candidate for anything again. I think the Democrats essentially believe that this is an election they could have won and that she lost it rightly or wrongly. I think that's what they believe. So the question is, who will be the standard bearer, and also who will be the presidential candidates in 2028? I think the obvious answer would certainly be Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. The fact that he was not chosen as a vice presidential running mate for Vice President Harris, I think is advantageous to him. It reminds me a little bit of 1956 when Adlai Stevenson opened the choice of vice president to the convention and said, you pick whoever you want, and that person will be my nominee. The last time that's happened in either major party, and they chose Tennessee Senator Estes Kefauver. Well, Stevenson and Kefauver lost miserably that year to Dwight D. Eisenhower and Richard Nixon, respectively, on the Republican side. And by 1960, the party was looking for somebody else, and many blamed Kefauver for their loss. So John F. Kennedy, many said, well, what if we put Kennedy on the ticket? And in 1960, Kennedy becomes the Democratic presidential nominee, even though he was only 43 years of age. So it really kind of benefited him that he lost that race. I think it's very similar to Governor Shapiro. A lot of Democrats are going to say, well, what if we had put Governor Shapiro on the ticket? Would he have won Pennsylvania? How would he have done in the Rust Belt? How would he have done? Would he have been able to break those 3 blue wall states? And I think it's really going to benefit him. The thing I wonder about him is, will he run for re-election in 2026? If everyone knows he's going to run for president, because he's going to be in a swing state. And the big question they're going to ask is, will you serve out your full term? And when everyone thinks you're going to run for president, it can be seen as somewhat presumptuous. I think of someone like Averell Harriman, for example, who as soon as he was thinking about was running for re-election, people were thinking he was going to run for president, and ended up losing his re-election bid. Rory Barnes, another one in 2002 in Georgia. So that'd be really interesting. He could do what Mitt Romney did. In 2006, Mitt Romney only served 1 term as governor of Massachusetts. Everyone thought he was going to run for president, so he said, I'm not going to run for re-election early on, and immediately started running for president. So I could see that scenario. I also looked for some of the red state governors, and I think Roy Cooper from North Carolina was also one who was on the short list as a potential vice presidential candidate. He took himself off, actually, because every time he would be out of the state, Mark Robinson, who's the incumbent lieutenant governor and a very conservative candidate who was running to succeed and would take over the state of North Carolina, the executive branch, and he did not want that. But he's somebody that I would think has been elected twice as governor, before that as attorney general, in a very purple to red state. So he'd be one that I would look at. Look at others. I'd look at Laura Kelly, the governor of Kansas, been elected twice in one of the reddest states in the nation. She might be, and she's been elected as an executive, so she's somebody who's been able to distance herself from the national party. And then you go around the country, you look at someone like Raphael Warnock, senator from Georgia, John Ossoff, senator from Georgia. Both were elected in a purple-red state in Georgia. And then you can keep going around the country looking at congressmen, looking at senators. I think someone like Jared Golden, who represents the Northern Congressional District, 2nd Congressional District of Maine, knows how to get elected in a district that won 8 points last time around for Donald Trump. So he knows how to get elected with rural voters. The problem he has is he's probably too conservative for the Democratic Party, but I still would use him as a spokesman sometimes on issues like reproductive rights. There's really a lot of candidates. And we're not even counting the people who could get elected in 2026, because we're in this scenario, and Obama really started it. As soon as Obama gets elected in the United States Senate in 2004, he starts running for president. So theoretically, as soon as someone gets elected in 2026, they could start running for president, or they could at least be on the short list as vice president. And I'd watch for Gretchen Whitmer, who would be finishing her second term in 2026. She could be an early front runner in 2028 as well, the governor of Michigan.
Let's ask and let's discuss Trump. So Trump was in the headlines today, really because of his first major pick as presidential-elect. His first major decision was naming Susie Wiles, the manager of his victorious campaign, as his White House chief of staff. As you know, Rich, this will be the first woman to hold this influential role. The AP says that she was able to do what few others have been able to do, and that is help control Trump's impulses. So, Rich, what should we know about Susie?
She's very much a political professional. She goes all the way back to working for Jack Kemp. You may remember Jack Kemp was a former congressman from New York, quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. He was also a teammate of Pat Summerall, the former sportscaster and former National Football League player. This is her daughter. This is his daughter, rather. She really has worked for many Republican presidential campaigns. She moved up the ladder. She worked for Trump in 2016. In 2018, she took a detour and actually worked for Ron DeSantis. She later had a falling out for Ron DeSantis. This was when he first was elected governor, first defeating Adam Putnam in the primary, and then landing up beating Andrew Gilliam in the general election by less than 1 point. So she's somebody that's really very much a political operative. And unlike many other Trump advisors and coefficients, she's somebody who's really stuck with him through thick and thin. And Trump, one thing about Donald Trump is he does tend to reward loyalty. This is someone he's very loyal to and she was very loyal to him. So I think that he wants somebody like that as chief of staff.
So Trump went through 4 chiefs of staff during his first administration. Why is this role important? Put this in plain English for those of us that haven't watched The West Wing and House of Cards.
Yeah, well, they're really, in part, they're in charge of, first of all, the White House staff. They give advice, for example, for appointments. There's actually somebody who's in charge specifically of appointments. But he's very much responsible. He or she, rather, is very much, should be the first female, is very much responsible. This position does not need Senate approval, unlike, say, Secretary of State or Interior or Human Services or any of the other cabinet positions. So they're also very much in charge of what the president's day is going to be like. And sometimes the president will use them in negotiations for the budget. I think back, for example, Bill Clinton had Erskine Bowles, and Erskine Bowles had a very good relationship on the Republican side with Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich and Trent Lott, the Senate Majority Leader. So they worked together and they ironed out a balanced budget agreement, which became the Balanced Budget Act of 1997. So that's really what they work on. They're somebody who's very loyal to the president. They're oftentimes the first person the president sees in the morning and the last person the president sees at night. So it's one of those jobs where it's really a 16, 17-hour job.
All right, Rich, we're going to leave it there for now. We're going to continue talking about Trump after a quick commercial break.